What happens when Hollywood's golden god of thunder walks into a daytime talk show and the lightning waiting for him isn't part of the script? The studio lights flare like a sunrise over polished floors. Applause erupts in rolling waves as Chris Hemsworth steps onto the stage, tall, calm, carrying that effortless movie star grin. He waves with easy charm, the kind that has sold billions at the box office. The audience is electric. Phones subtly lift. Whispers ripple through the front rows. Before we go any further, if you love cinematic, explosive celebrity stories told like you're inside the moment, make sure you subscribe to Live Narratives right now. Hit like, drop a comment, and buckle up, because this one gets intense. Chris takes his seat at the table. Across from him, Sunny Hostin watches with a measured smile, sharp eyes, posture straight, energy focused. Around them, the other hosts exchange polite greetings, but there's something hovering in the air. Not visible, not spoken, just felt. The small talk begins smoothly. "So, Chris," Sunny says warmly, "another massive film, another global tour. Does it ever get old being the most recognizable superhero in the world?" Chris chuckles, leaning back casually. "I don't know about that. My kids definitely don't think I'm a superhero. They think I'm embarrassing most of the time." Laughter. Applause. Safe ground. He talks about training, about family life in Australia, about trying to stay grounded. His voice is steady, warm. He tells a story about injuring himself on set. The audience leans in. Everything feels controlled. Predictable. But Sunny's eyes don't drift. They study. And with that kind of influence, she continues, tone shifting just slightly, comes responsibility. You've spoken about health, longevity, stepping back from certain roles after discovering genetic markers. Some people admired that. Others said it sounded privileged. What do you say to fans who can't afford to step back from anything? The applause fades quicker this time. Chris's smile doesn't disappear, but it tightens. "Well," he begins carefully, "I was lucky to have access to information. I wanted to share that journey so people could be proactive about their health." Sunny tilts her head. "But sharing it through a streaming docuseries that most people have to pay to watch, does that really make it accessible?" A murmur ripples through the audience. Chris shifts in his seat, crossing one ankle over his knee. The intention wasn't exclusivity. It was storytelling. Awareness. Awareness for who? Sunny presses gently, but there's steel underneath. Because a lot of viewers felt it highlighted a gap between celebrity wellness culture and everyday survival. The temperature in the room drops. One of the co-hosts attempts a soft pivot. "Well, speaking of survival, those action scenes look brutal." But Sunny doesn't release the thread. Chris's jaw flexes almost imperceptibly. He inhales slowly. His training, years of press tours, difficult interviews, kicks in. "Stay calm. Stay measured. I understand the criticism," he says evenly. "But I can't apologize for encouraging people to take their health seriously." Sunny leans forward now, elbows resting lightly on the table. "No one's asking for an apology. I'm asking if you recognize that messaging can feel tone-deaf when millions are struggling just to access basic healthcare." There it is. The audience is silent now. No coughs. No shifting seats. Just tension, thick and humming. Chris's eyes lock with hers. For a split second, the charming Avenger disappears. What's left is a man calculating every word. "I grew up in a regular family," he replies. "We didn't have everything. I know what it's like not to have options." "But now you do," Sunny responds swiftly. And when celebrities frame lifestyle optimization as a personal choice, it can ignore systemic barriers. A faint gasp from somewhere in the third row. Chris exhales through his nose. "With respect, I'm not a policymaker. I'm an actor sharing his experience." "And with respect," Sunny counters, voice calm but unyielding. "Actors with platforms shape culture. Culture shapes priorities." The applause sign flickers uncertainly, but no one claps. Chris leans forward now, too. The distance between them shrinks, not physically, but energetically. "So, what would you prefer I do?" he asks, tone still polite but firmer. "Stay silent? Pretend I didn't learn something that could help someone." Sunny doesn't blink. I'd prefer honesty about privilege. That's all. The word hangs in the air like a challenge. Privilege. Chris's fingers tighten subtly on the edge of the table. The camera zooms closer. Millions at home are watching, some nodding, some bristling, all sensing the shift. I have never claimed to be anything other than fortunate, he says slowly. But fortune doesn't invalidate personal growth. And personal growth, Sunny replies, doesn't exist in a vacuum. A host to the side laughs nervously. Okay, wow, we're getting deep today. But it's too late to lighten it. The energy has changed. The interview is no longer promotional. It's personal, philosophical, almost confrontational. Chris straightens his shoulders, Thor-like composure returning, but there's a flicker in his eyes now. Not anger.
Not yet.
But heat. The audience senses it too. They didn't come for a debate on socioeconomic disparities. They came for charm. For stories about hammers and Hollywood. Instead, they're witnessing something raw. Sunny softens her tone just slightly. I respect your work, Chris. Truly. But influence carries weight. And sometimes the strongest heroes are the ones who listen. A beat. Chris studies her, then nods once. And sometimes, he says quietly, strength is standing by your intentions even when they're misunderstood. The silence after that is louder than any applause. The segment clock ticks down. Producers behind the cameras exchange glances. This wasn't on the rundown. Sunny smiles, but it's no longer purely cordial. Well, she says, we appreciate the conversation. Chris mirrors the smile. Controlled. Contained. But as the camera cuts to commercial and the applause sign finally blazes back to life, there's a visible shift in his posture. The relaxed superhero has disappeared. In his place sits a man who didn't expect to be challenged this directly and didn't like how it felt. And the storm? It's only beginning. The applause during the commercial break feels forced, like thunder that doesn't quite match the lightning. Music pumps through the studio speakers, upbeat and artificial, but the energy at the table is different now. Chris Hemsworth leans back in his chair, jaw tight, eyes focused somewhere beyond the bright studio lights. Across from him, Sunny Hostin adjusts her notes calmly, her composure unshaken. If there's tension in her shoulders, she doesn't show it. A production assistant rushes in with a water glass. Another host whispers something light to Chris, trying to smooth the air. He nods politely, smiles briefly. But the smile doesn't reach his eyes. 30 seconds to live. A stage manager counts down with her fingers.
5, 4, 3, 2.
The red camera light flicks on. And we're back with Chris Hemsworth. Sunny announces smoothly, her television voice warm again, but sharper underneath. The audience claps on cue. Chris leans forward this time, elbows on the table, as if ready.
Prepared.
Sunny wastes no time. Chris, before the break, we were discussing influence and responsibility. I want to pivot slightly because you've also faced criticism for staying silent on certain global issues while being very vocal about personal wellness. There it is again.
Direct.
Surgical. A faint stir in the crowd. Chris blinks once.
Slow.
I try not to speak recklessly on issues I'm not fully educated about, he replies evenly. I think there's enough noise in the world. Sunny nods.
Fair.
But when you're one of the most recognizable men on the planet, silence can also be a statement. The co-host beside her shifts uncomfortably. Maybe we should talk about the new film. But Sunny continues, eyes never leaving Chris. Fans notice when celebrities promote products, brands, fitness apps, but remain neutral during humanitarian crises. The temperature drops another degree. Chris's fingers interlace now. Calm body language. Controlled breathing. I donate privately, he says firmly. I support causes quietly. Not everything needs a press release. A small wave of applause breaks out from part of the audience. Supportive. Defensive. Sunny tilts her head. But visibility inspires action. If you have the platform to move millions, why not use it publicly? Chris's voice lowers half a tone. Because sometimes public activism becomes performance. A ripple. A few audible MMMs from the audience. Sunny's eyebrow lifts slightly. Are you implying that public advocacy is performative? I'm saying, Chris answers carefully, that not everyone who chooses privacy is indifferent. His Australian accent thickens just a touch, a subtle sign of emotion creeping in. Sunny leans back this time, studying him. Let me ask you something more direct. Chris nods once. Go ahead. Do you believe celebrities have a moral obligation to speak out on political or social injustice? There's no background music now. No laughter track. Just the hum of studio lights. Chris pauses. This isn't a movie set. There's no script supervisor handing him lines. No director calling cut. I believe, he begins slowly, that celebrities are human beings first. We're allowed to care deeply, and we're allowed to process privately. Sunny doesn't blink. But you profit publicly. A sharp inhale from somewhere in the crowd. Chris's jaw tightens visibly now. I work for that profit, he replies. I train. I risk injury. I spend months away from my family. And many people work just as hard, Sunny counters gently, without multi-million-dollar contracts. There it is again, the undercurrent of privilege. The other hosts are silent now. No interruptions. No comic relief. Chris leans closer to the table. With respect, he says, voice firm but controlled, I never claimed my life was harder than anyone else's. But do you acknowledge, Sunny presses, that your influence carries disproportionate weight in shaping public narratives? He exhales slowly through his nose.
Yes.
It does.
A pause.
And I try to use that influence responsibly. Sunny folds her hands. Responsibly according to who? The question lands like a hammer. For the first time, Chris hesitates longer than comfortable. According to my conscience, he says finally. And what if your conscience is shaped by a system that benefits you? Sunny asks. A few audience members shift in their seats. Someone coughs nervously. Chris's calm facade flickers, just briefly. I think, he says carefully, we're drifting into a space where any answer I give will be framed as insufficient. Sunny doesn't deny it. Conversations about power are uncomfortable, she replies. And sometimes, Chris says, his voice no longer soft, they become accusatory. The word hangs heavy.
Accusatory.
Sunny's posture straightens slightly. No one is accusing you of wrongdoing. It feels like it, Chris says. The room freezes. For a split second, even Sunny looks taken aback by the rawness of that admission. He continues more openly now. I came here to talk about a film I poured my heart into. Instead, we're dissecting my moral compass like I'm on trial. A low murmur ripples across the audience. Sunny's voice softens, but her gaze stays steady. It's not a trial. It's accountability. Chris lets out a short, incredulous laugh. Not amused. Not angry. Just stunned. Accountability for what? He asks. For not tweeting enough? A few scattered claps. A few uncomfortable looks. Sunny responds calmly. For understanding the impact of your silence. Chris leans back, finally breaking eye contact for the first time. He looks out toward the audience, searching, perhaps, for neutrality. But the crowd is divided. Some nod with Sunny. Others cross their arms defensively in support of him. The co-host at the end of the table attempts another pivot. Let's talk about the physical training. You almost fainted during one stunt, right? But Chris doesn't take the lifeline. He turns back to Sunny. You want honesty? He says quietly. Sunny nods. Sometimes I stay silent because I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing and making it worse. The vulnerability lands differently. The audience softens slightly. Sunny studies him carefully. That's human. Yes, Chris agrees. It is. A long pause stretches between them, not hostile now, but charged. Then Sunny adds, but fear can't be the final answer. Chris's eyes sharpen again. And pressure can't be the only strategy, he responds. The red camera light flickers off as the segment time runs out again. Applause. Hesitant at first, then louder, encouraged by the flashing sign. But as the music swells and the show cuts toward another break, Chris doesn't smile this time. He sits still, shoulders squared, eyes forward. The storm outside the studio hasn't even begun yet, because millions watching at home are already choosing sides. And social media? It's about to explode. By the time the show returns from its final commercial break, the tension is no longer subtle. It's visible, tangible, like static in the air before a lightning strike. Backstage monitors glow with live social media feeds. Producers whisper urgently into headsets. A hashtag has already begun climbing. Clips of the first exchange are circulating in real time. Viewers are choosing sides faster than the cameras can cut angles. On stage, though, everything must look composed. The theme music fades. "And we're back," Sunny says, her voice steady, polished, almost serene. Chris sits upright now, not leaning back, not relaxed, grounded. His forearms rest on the table, hands clasped together. His expression is no longer promotional. It's focused. Sunny offers a small smile. "Chris, I want to shift this conversation somewhere constructive." A few audience members nod hopefully. She continues, "You've said you fear saying the wrong thing publicly. But don't you think that fear is exactly why people want you to speak? Because authenticity includes imperfection." Chris watches her closely. "I don't mind imperfection," he replies. "I mind distortion." The word lands sharply. "Distortion?" Sunny asks. "Yes," he says. Sound bites clipped. Headlines twisted. Intent rewritten. The audience murmurs. They understand that part. They've seen it happen before. Sunny nods slowly. That's a valid concern. But doesn't avoiding the conversation entirely also allow others to define it for you? Chris leans forward slightly. "Maybe," he admits. "But I also don't think every actor needs to become a spokesperson for every global issue." "No one's asking for every issue," Sunny replies. "But when something directly impacts the communities who support your films, isn't that worth acknowledgement?" Chris's eyes narrow just slightly, not in anger, but in intensity. "And how do you determine which acknowledgement is enough?" he asks. "A tweet? A speech? A donation receipt?" Sunny doesn't hesitate. Effort. Consistency. Presence. "And if that presence becomes political," he counters. She answers evenly. "Human rights aren't political." The audience reacts audibly now, some clapping, some shifting. Chris exhales slowly. "This is exactly what I mean," he says. It becomes binary. Speak up and you're praised by one side, condemned by another. Stay quiet and you're complicit. Sunny leans in, voice calm but unwavering. "Leadership is uncomfortable." "And I never signed up to be a leader," Chris replies quickly. That line hits harder than expected. A ripple passes through the crowd. Sunny tilts her head. "With respect, you did. The moment you accepted the spotlight." Chris's jaw tightens again. "I accepted a role as an entertainer," he says firmly. "Not a moral authority." "And yet millions look to you," she responds softly. There's a beat. Chris glances out at the audience, faces staring back, some sympathetic, some expectant. "I can't control who looks at me," he says quietly. "I can only control who I am." Sunny studies him for a long moment. "And who are you?" she asks gently. The question shifts the energy entirely. For the first time, this doesn't feel like debate. It feels personal. Chris pauses. "I'm a father," he says. "A husband. A guy who grew up surfing and chasing waves. I act for a living. I try to be decent. I try to raise good kids." His voice isn't defensive now. It's grounded. Sunny nods. "Then what lesson do you want your kids to learn about using their voice?" The room goes still. Chris's lips part, then close again. That one landed. He leans back slightly, thinking. "I want them to learn to speak when they understand," he says carefully. "Not because they're pressured." "And what if understanding comes from listening?"
Sunny asks.
Chris meets her gaze again. This time, it's less combative, more contemplative. "I do listen," he says, "but I won't perform outrage for applause." A sharp intake of breath from someone in the front row. Sunny raises an eyebrow. "You think advocacy is performance?" "I think sometimes," Chris replies, choosing his words like stepping stones across deep water, Public figures amplify things because they're expected to, not because they've done the internal work. Sunny holds his gaze. And have you done that work? She asks. The silence stretches long enough to feel uncomfortable. Yes, Chris says finally, but privately. And privacy protects you, Sunny says quietly. There it is again, that subtle return to privilege. Chris's expression hardens just slightly. Are we saying privacy is only for regular people? He asks. No, Sunny answers. I'm saying power changes responsibility. The audience reacts again, divided applause echoing across the studio. Chris shakes his head faintly. You know what's interesting, he says, voice steady but edged now. When I donate quietly, I'm invisible. When I speak cautiously, I'm complicit. When I stay silent, I'm guilty. There's no version where I'm simply human. Sunny doesn't flinch. Being human doesn't exempt anyone from impact, she replies. The air feels heavier. One of the co-hosts finally interjects gently. I think what Sunny's saying is that people want connection. Chris turns toward her. And I want that too, he says. But connection isn't coercion. The word choice lands sharply. Sunny's posture straightens. Are you suggesting this conversation is coercive? Chris pauses, and for a split second, it feels like he might back down. But he doesn't. I'm suggesting, he says slowly, that sometimes interviews feel less like dialogue and more like interrogation.
Gasps.
Audible.
Real.
Sunny's expression tightens, just barely. This is a platform for tough questions, she says. And I respect tough questions, Chris responds. But respect goes both ways. The temperature spikes. For the first time, Sunny's composure flickers. Are you implying I'm being disrespectful? I'm implying, Chris says, voice low and controlled, that nuance matters. And it doesn't always survive television. The audience is fully alert now. No phones hidden. No distractions. Every eye locked on the table. Sunny takes a breath. You're right about nuance, she says. But viewers deserve transparency. And I'm being transparent, Chris says. Selective transparency, she replies. That does it. Chris's hands unclasp, palms flattening lightly on the table. I've answered every question you've asked, he says firmly. But it feels like the only acceptable answer is the one you agree with. The room falls silent. Sunny meets his stare. This isn't about me agreeing, she says. It's about accountability. Chris leans back slowly. And there it is again, he murmurs. The red light on the camera glows intensely. Millions watching. Millions interpreting. The conversation is no longer about wellness or activism. It's about control. And neither of them is willing to give it up. The segment clock ticks down, but no one reaches for humor this time. No pivot. No safe topic. Just two strong personalities, locked in a debate neither expected to escalate this far. And as the director whispers urgently into headsets behind the scenes, one thing becomes painfully clear. This interview is no longer promotional. It's combustible. And the explosion hasn't even reached its peak. The silence after that last exchange feels endless. Not the comfortable kind. Not the thoughtful kind. The kind that hums in your ears and makes every breath in the room sound amplified. Chris sits back, shoulders squared, chest rising slowly. Sunny remains poised, but her hands are now clasped tighter than before. The air between them isn't just tense, it's charged. The camera stays close. Sunny speaks first. Chris, no one here is attacking you. Her tone is controlled, but there's an undercurrent now, something firmer than before. Chris nods once. I didn't say attacking. You said interrogation. I said it feels like one. The distinction hangs there. A few audience members clap lightly, unsure whether they're supporting him or just reacting to the friction. Sunny turns slightly toward the audience, then back to Chris. This show has always asked hard questions. From politicians. From CEOs. From actors. Accountability isn't personal. Chris tilts his head. It becomes personal when it's persistent, he says. A subtle murmur ripples through the crowd. Sunny's gaze sharpens. Persistent because the answers matter. And I've given you my answers, Chris replies, voice steady, but no longer soft. You've given perspective, she says, but not ownership. That word lands like a crack of thunder. Ownership. Chris's expression changes. Not explosive, not theatrical, but real. A flash of frustration breaks through the polished exterior. What exactly am I supposed to own? He asks, his voice finally rising half a notch. Being successful? Having a platform I didn't invent but happened to stand on? Sunny doesn't raise her voice. That contrast makes it sharper. Own the impact, she says, even if unintended. The audience splits, half applauding, half silent. Chris lets out a short breath through his nose, shaking his head faintly. You keep framing this as if I've caused harm. No, Sunny replies quickly. I'm saying influence carries consequence. And I agree with that, Chris says, leaning forward again. But consequence doesn't equal guilt. The studio feels smaller now. Tighter. One of the co-hosts tries again, gently. Maybe we can find common ground here. But neither Chris nor Sunny moves their gaze. Sunny's voice lowers slightly. When fans see you prioritize wellness and lifestyle branding while staying neutral on suffering, it creates perception. Chris responds immediately. And perception isn't always truth.
True, she says.
But it's powerful. He nods once. So, is context.
A beat.
Sunny studies him, then asks quietly, would you do anything differently? It's the first question that doesn't sound like challenge. It sounds like invitation. Chris pauses. The studio waits. If I'm honest, he says. Sunny nods. I would probably prepare differently, he admits. Not because I think I'm wrong, but because I underestimated how this conversation would be framed. A low ripple of reaction from the crowd. Sunny's eyebrow lifts. Framed by whom? Chris doesn't hesitate this time. By you.
Gasps. Clear.
Audible. Unfiltered. Sunny's composure flickers, just for a second. Are you suggesting bias? She asks. I'm suggesting, Chris says, voice calm but firm, that from the moment we shifted topics, the questions weren't about understanding. They were about pushing. The word hits. Pushing. Sunny straightens in her seat. Pushing for clarity. Pushing toward a conclusion, he counters. The audience is fully divided now, applause colliding with silence. Sunny's voice tightens slightly. You're uncomfortable. Yes, Chris says immediately. The honesty disarms the room. Yes, I am uncomfortable, he repeats. Because this stopped feeling like a conversation about impact and started feeling like a litmus test. The co-host beside Sunny finally interjects more firmly. Chris, I don't think anyone here is testing you. He turns toward her, softer. I respect that. But it feels like unless I declare myself a certain way publicly, I'm insufficient. Sunny responds quickly. No one asked for declarations. You asked for ownership, he says. And when I asked what that looks like, there wasn't a clear answer. Sunny's lips press together briefly. Ownership looks like acknowledgement without defensiveness, she says. Chris laughs, not mockingly, but incredulously. And what have I been doing? Sunny meets his gaze. Defending. The word slices clean. The audience reacts instantly, some clapping loudly, others shaking their heads. Chris leans back again, running a hand briefly over his jaw. Of course I'm defending, he says. I walked into a promotional interview and found myself in a moral debate. And we're allowed to ask those questions, Sunny replies. And I'm allowed to say it feels disproportionate, he answers. The room is buzzing now. Tension layered over tension. Behind the cameras, producers are gesturing subtly, signaling wrap-up. The segment has stretched longer than planned. Sunny takes a breath. Let me ask you one final thing, she says.
Chris nods, guarded.
If a young actor watching this interview asks you how to handle having a platform, what would you tell them? The question lands differently. Less combative. More reflective. Chris thinks for a long moment. I'd tell them, he says slowly, to remember they're human before their headlines. The audience quiets. I'd tell them to educate themselves privately before they speak publicly. And I'd tell them not to let fear dictate silence, but also not to let pressure dictate performance. Sunny listens. And I'd tell them, He continues, voice steady now, that they won't please everyone. So they better know who they are before the world tells them who to be. There's a small wave of applause, genuine this time. Sunny nods slowly.
That's fair, she says.
For the first time since the debate ignited, the tension eases slightly. But it's fragile. The camera widens. The theme music begins to swell softly, the signal that time is up. Sunny turns toward the audience. Chris Hemsworth, everyone. Applause fills the studio. Louder now, but layered with complexity.
Chris stands.
He smiles, but it's not the relaxed smile from earlier. It's composed. Professional. He shakes Sunny's hand. Their eye contact lingers half a second longer than usual. Not hostile. Not warm. Unresolved. As he walks off stage, the cameras follow him briefly, capturing the straight set of his shoulders, the quiet intensity still radiating off him. Back at the table, Sunny adjusts her notes again. The show moves on. But everyone in that room knows something shifted. And outside the studio walls? The explosion is already happening. By the time Chris Hemsworth's car door closes outside the studio, the internet is already on fire. Clips of the exchange flood timelines within minutes. One angle shows Sunny leaning forward, voice steady, pressing the word ownership. Another clip isolates Chris saying, "It feels like an interrogation." A third freezes on the moment he says, "I underestimated how this conversation would be framed by you." Hashtags multiply. Some call him courageous for standing his ground. Others accuse him of deflecting accountability. Think pieces begin forming before the show even finishes airing on the West Coast. Inside the studio, the audience files out buzzing. I think she was right. No, he handled that calmly. He looked blindsided. She pushed too hard. Everyone has a version. Everyone has a verdict. Backstage, producers replay segments in hushed circles. Publicists check phones with tightening expressions. Chris's team huddles nearby, voices low but urgent. That clip is going viral. We need a statement. Or maybe we don't. Chris stands slightly apart from the chaos for a moment, staring at his reflection in a dressing room mirror. The studio makeup is still flawless. The suit still sharp. But his eyes look different now, less relaxed, more aware. He exhales slowly. I wasn't angry, he says quietly to his publicist. I know, she replies. It just felt like I was being cornered. She nods. That's how it's being framed online too. He gives a faint, almost tired smile. Of course it is. Across town, Sunny is also being debriefed. You held your ground. You were firm. Some are saying you went too far. Sunny scrolls briefly through her phone, watching the reactions stack up in real time. She sees praise. She sees criticism. She sees headlines already exaggerating phrases into battle cries. Explosive showdown. Thor versus The View. Sunny grills Hemsworth live. She sets the phone down. It wasn't about winning, she says quietly. It was about asking. But in the world of television, asking and accusing often blur. That evening, primetime panels dissect the moment frame by frame. Body language experts weigh in. Commentators debate celebrity responsibility. Fans flood Chris's social media with both support and demands. Stay out of politics. Use your platform. You were respectful. You were defensive. The storm doesn't choose a side. It just rages. And somewhere in the middle of it all is the clip that plays on loop. Chris leaning forward, voice controlled but firm. There's no version where I'm simply human. That line resonates. For some, it sounds like avoidance. For others, it sounds painfully honest. The next morning, the headlines grow sharper. Articles analyze the turning point. They replay Sunny's calm insistence. Ownership looks like acknowledgement without defensiveness. They replay Chris's response, of course undefending. The narrative becomes bigger than the interview. It becomes symbolic. Celebrity versus accountability. Privacy versus platform. Human versus headline. Chris eventually posts a measured message. No dramatic declarations. No political pivot. Just a calm statement thanking the hosts for the conversation, acknowledging that These discussions are complex and ongoing, and expressing hope that we can create space for nuance without hostility. The comment section explodes anyway. Sunny addresses the moment briefly on the next episode. "We ask hard questions here," she says, "and we respect guests who engage." Some applaud. Some roll their eyes. But the clip lives on. Weeks later, it's still circulating, edited into dramatic reels, slowed down for emphasis, debated in comment threads with thousands of replies. And the truth? It was never a screaming match. No one flipped a table. No one stormed off. What made it explosive was something quieter. Two strong personalities refusing to retreat. Two different philosophies colliding under hot lights. Chris believed humanity deserved space. Sunny believed influence demanded accountability. Neither surrendered. And that unresolved tension, that refusal to neatly wrap the conversation in a bow, is what made the moment unforgettable. In interviews after that, Chris becomes slightly more prepared when social issues arise. Not louder, not radically different, just more precise. Sunny continues asking tough questions of every guest, not just him. The audience, meanwhile, keeps watching, because conflict reveals character. And sometimes the most powerful explosions aren't loud. They're controlled burns that linger long after the smoke clears.
So what do you think?
Was Chris Hemsworth unfairly cornered, or was Sunny Hostin simply doing her job? Should celebrities be expected to speak out more boldly, or do they deserve the right to process privately without public pressure? Drop your opinion in the comments. I want to know where you stand. And if you love stepping inside these high-stakes moments, feeling the tension, the emotion, the unfiltered clash of perspectives, make sure you subscribe to Live Narratives right now. Like this video if you felt the intensity. Share it with someone who needs to see both sides. Because the next explosive interview, it might be even bigger, and you won't want to miss it.